Gladiators in ancient Rome, professional warriors, superstars and womanizers. In the Colosseum in Rome, 50,000 people either hailed them as heroes or scorned them as losers. Despite their infamous popularity, we don't know with which exact sign the crowd used to judge the losers. And we don't know whether the gladiators really greeted the editores, the game organizers, with the famous formula Ave Imperator morituri te salutant, Hail Emperor, those bound to die salute you. Actually, there's only one single recorded instance of that phrase uttered, namely to the Emperor Claudius during a staged naval battle, a so-called naumachia, so not even during a gladiator fight. A typical day of ludi publici, public games, would involve much more than just gladiatorial fights. The Romans would discuss the upcoming events on the crowded streets of the city. In this video we will follow a realistic but fictional character, Gaius Gavius, a common Roman man, during his experiences at the games. Months before, he would have heard about the games for the first time. He would have picked up who organized them and what spectacles were to expect. Such information was spread in dipinti, ink inscriptions. Archaeologists found some of these dipinti on ancient walls. Here's an example, quote, 20 pairs of gladiators of Decimus Lucretius Satrinus Valens, the permanent priest of Nero Caesar Augustus, will fight in Pompeii on the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th of April. There will be a proper animal chase and canvas awnings, end quote. Because the city of Rome was so crowded during these public games, Gaius, who lived outside the city, would have slept in an improvised wooden shed or in a tent on the side of the streets. We know this thanks to the ancient biographer and gossip expert Suetonius. The city was packed with so many visitors that the Emperor Augustus ordered uniformed soldiers to patrol the streets. This was to prevent pickpocketing, robberies and violence among the stoked-up fans. In the very early morning, the masses would rush to the arena to get the best seats. More often than not, this meant that many were hurt or even trampled to death in the regularly ensuing panic of the packed streets. Arriving at the Colosseum, Gaius, as any Roman citizen, would get a free entry. He'd sit somewhere in the middle ranks of the arena, below him the senators and equestrians, above him the slaves and the women. Having to sit on the worst seats did not harm women's fanaticism for the games. The reports about groupie-like affections for the gladiators is well documented in Pompeian graffiti. In one of them, a gladiator is venerated as late-night medicine for women, another as ruler of women. When Gaius finally found a seat, he would excitedly speculate with his seatmates about potential victors and losers of the game. The ancient poets Ovid and Juvenal inform us that bets, in Latin sponsiones, were another hot topic of pre-game conversations. Sadly, specifics about the bets are not recorded in the sources. On the topic of these Roman vices, the historiographer Tacitus noted, shaking his head, quote, "The excitement for spectacles and passion for gladiators, a plague. Not even teachers would talk about anything else," he says. The games began in the morning with so-called venationes, shows with tamed animals and animal fights. Here, different pairs of animals, the more exotic the better, would show off tricks or would be forced to fight each other. After Emperor Nero's reign, it became also common that men would hunt the beasts. These were not gladiators, but so-called venatores. Around noon, the show continued with the capital punishment of sentenced criminals. They had to fight against the surviving animals. This was called damnatio ad bestias, which, in most cases, meant to be torn apart by wild beasts, and in any case, certain death. Sometimes this was dramatized as some sort of reality myth, in which the condemned criminals had to reenact mythical stories. Another possible method of execution was the damnatio ad ferrum, literally damnation at the sword. Often this meant the criminals had to fight one of the gladiators. This gave the victim the chance to fight honorably and get pardoned. Before the real gladiators began to fight, some Roman nobles or even spectators had a go at each other with blunt weapons. According to most historians, the famous Emperor Commodus, the antagonist in the movie Gladiator, participated in this. According to the ancient historiographer Cassius Dio, he slew up to 100 bears in a day, but he did it with a bow and arrows from the safety of an elevated platform. The highlight of the games was the Munus Gladiatorium, the proper gladiator fights, which took place in the afternoon. Munus, or in plural munera, generally means gift, service for the gods or the public. Among all public services, the population of Rome appreciated games the most. It became the munus par excellence, even without the specification gladiatorum or gladiatorium. During the Republic, Roman politicians quickly realized the potential of the spectacles as a means to make themselves more popular. Thus, the famous phrase bread and games, in Latin panem et circenses, was later coined by Juvenal in the 1st or 2nd century AD. With this, he meant to say that all the emperors had to do was to hold games and feed the people in order to keep them obedient. Now, Gaius would witness the gladiators entering the arena solemnly. They might have come through a tunnel which directly connected the Colosseum with the Ludus Magnus, the biggest gladiatorial school of the city. A trumpet blast announced the actual gladiator games. Frenetic fans would shout and cry as the gladiators began to fight. One-on-one fights were most frequent, but sometimes groups fought each other as well. According to Quintilian, an ancient rhetorician, the fights were usually guided by 1 or 2 referees and followed a set of rules. Forensic studies, which have analyzed the head injuries of gladiators in detail, confirm this and have argued that the fights were not an unchecked melee, but more a form of martial art. The gladiators usually fought in common pairings. A retiarius would often fight a secutor. This pairing dramatized the fight of a fisherman, the retiarius, against a fish, the secutor. While the lightly armored retiarius tried to evade his heavily armored opponent, the secutor would try to catch him as soon as possible. His name comes from the Latin word sequor, I follow. A prolonged fight would have exhausted him more quickly than his lightly armored opponent. Gaius might have also witnessed a murmillo fighting a thrax or hopolomachus. The murmillo was modeled after the Roman legionary but had a different helmet. The thrax is said to have resembled the Thracian warriors. As one of the combatants would inevitably lose, the spectators shouted "Habet, hoc habet." He's got it, now he's got it. If the loser hadn't already died, he could plead for pity by raising a finger. He usually stood at the mercy of the people, according to the ancient philosopher Seneca. The game organizers, often the emperor himself, let them decide about the fate of the gladiators. This was a psychological mechanism to acclaim or criticize the ruler. The citizens checked whether the game's promoters had the same idea of virtus, bravery, of clementia, leniency, and finally of justitia, justice, as they had. This was crucial for political approval from the crowd. Historian Egan Fleig notes that, quote, "No other ritual could so powerfully demonstrate the citizens' political consensus. In Rome, with the emperor, in the provinces, with the local aristocracy. Therefore, although Roman authors expressed their disgust over the theatre, almost to a man they judged the gladiator system highly." End quote. Ultimately, the signal for death or life was probably given with the thumb, but we do not know how it was performed exactly. Juvenal only says, quote, "Now they host gladiator games, and as the people demand with a turned thumb, they kill vulgarly." End quote. A thumb down might have meant death. This sign might have symbolized a sword placed on the torso and pushed down to execute the losing gladiator. A different interpretation takes into account that in a pre-Christian imagination, without the idea of heaven or hell, a thumbs up might have meant a removal from Mother Earth, while a thumbs down could have also signaled the remain on Earth. It is also possible that death was indicated with a thumb pointed to the own breast or throat. There is no historical evidence for any of the mentioned possibilities though, but we do know what the spectators shouted. If they cried "Jugula," cut him down, the defeated gladiator was to be killed. If they shouted "Mite," let him go, or "Missum," then he was to live for another fight. The fights could also end in a draw. According to historian Marcus Junkelmann, this was actually the least frequent but most renowned outcome of a fight. When the games were coming to an end, the dead bodies would stack up below the Colosseum. Before the tedious, everyday business of life started to occupy Gaius's mind again, he might have used the money he won on a successful bet to go out in one of the Roman tabernae, the bars, to have himself a drink and reflect on the spectacles he had witnessed during the day.